Kia ora, and welcome to another video celebrating World Breastfeeding Week 2020. This is intended as a platform to share diverse experiences and information, and we hope that you find this series supportive and informative. It is important to note that these are personal stories and opinions and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women's Health Action or our funders. Please seek advice from your health professional before making any important decisions about infant or young child feeding.
Kia ora and welcome to another World Breastfeeding Week video. Today I'm really excited to be joined by Professor Amy Brown. Amy is based in the Department of Public Health Policy and Social Sciences at Swansea. Is that the right pronunciation, Amy? Swansea University? Or, yeah, in the UK. She spent many years exploring psychological, cultural and societal influences that impact feeding decisions, and her research seeks to understand how we can shift our perceptions of how babies are fed away from individual mothering to an issue of wider public health and discussion. So welcome, Amy. Kia ora, and thank you so much for joining me. I thought maybe we could start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself and your whānau, your family.
Yeah, so I'm based in Swansea. Swansea is a place where nobody seems to be able to pronounce it. If you live in New Zealand, Australia, or the US in particular, it's something about the way that I think the word goes together and accents, but you did a brilliant job.
Oh.
So Swansea is down in South Wales in the UK. It's usually raining. It's surprisingly sunny today. It's 10 a.m. recording this, so it's actually a nice day. So I'm based here with my three children who are now 14, nearly 12 and nearly 10. So it's technically the school summer holidays. I'm not sure anything is any different because the schools shut in March due to COVID with lockdown. So they've been home since then, but about three days. So basically they're on the internet all day long.
Yeah, I hear that. Cool. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to share about yourself, or if we sort of get into what you do?
So those of you who don't know me, I'm an academic. I'm a researcher at Swansea University in public health. Specifically, we recently set up a new research centre all about feeding babies. So it's called LIFT, which is Lactation, Infant Feeding and Translation. It's basically
nice.
doing stuff about doing research that matters and getting the messages out there. So
cool.
I'm based there leading that, doing research about that stuff, and then spending a lot of time on social media talking about it.
Sure. So, I mean, you've contributed so much knowledge to the field of parenting and infant and young child feeding that it's hard to know where to even begin. I was lucky enough to see you when you were here in New Zealand at the Lactation conference in Christchurch, and I was really excited to be able to chat with you. And I really enjoyed watching your animations of your research findings, and I think it's a really lovely way of helping share the evidence-based messages that you have with new parents. And I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of your research and some of the key things that you've learned talking to the thousands of parents and health professionals that you've encountered along the way. For those sort of, I guess, the things that you think are really important, some of the myths and misconceptions that you've come across, held by parents or health workers, and I guess generally what you think is important to, or what parents have said are important to them, and how doesn't, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I started doing this when my eldest, who is now 14, was a baby.
Oh, wow.
And it kind of stemmed from my experiences kind of interacting with people then. So I was breastfeeding him, it was all going fine, but I kept getting people saying like really stupid things to me, like, you know, like just ridiculous things. I remember a health professional once telling me that I had to, did I drink enough milk because I needed milk to make milk? And I just sort of stared at her and went, what do you think would happen to that milk? Do you think it literally fills up in your breasts? I don't know. And another one who told me that because he was feeding every 2 hours, that he clearly wasn't getting enough milk. He was one of those round babies with fold on fold of fat that was like 99th percentile baby. There was no way he wasn't getting enough milk. He just fed like a normal baby. It was all of that stuff. And it was then all the women I met who were saying that they just had all these problems and didn't have enough milk. And all the kind of, well, he fed too much, or clearly he fed every 2 hours, so clearly I wasn't making enough milk for him, or I should have put him in a routine, or my mother said this, all of that stuff. And I thought, there is just so much misinformation out there.
Yeah.
And if you aren't getting it from health professionals, then, and of course, not all health professionals, obviously, but the ones who are saying these things.
Hashtag not all health professionals.
Obviously. But the ones who are sharing incorrect information are having a major impact. It all fits into that sort of real kind of, we just don't understand babies very well, do we?
Sure. And it must have been such a, I guess it's really neat to feel like there's a person out there doing research that's really drawing on really like lived experiences and starting to see these things that you've encountered through the research that you're continuing to do. I think that brings so much to the genuine sort of way that you approach things.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot of research out there on the questions that need answering. So it's things like all those myths we know not to be true through our experiences of supporting breastfeeding. There's not necessarily any research to show it, because if you kind of go back and think about how research happens, usually you have to get someone who's interested in the subject, you have to maybe get funding, you have to at least have a research post to do it, and publish it. So stuff that matters to women often isn't researched. It's often the big stuff that gets money and
yeah, where does the funding come from to help inform that research, and how does that impact on it? I guess that's a whole nother conversation, but
yes. So I kind of started doing the research that would answer people's questions.
Awesome.
So I think I get laughed at sometimes by colleagues because, in a nice way, I don't mean in a nasty way, but we do kind of really obvious research sometimes, but
sure,
research that hasn't actually been published. So you need that research to be able to say, look, actually there's evidence on this. So we did a study that we jokingly say that, we did a study and it showed babies wake up at night. You definitely needed research for that, didn't you? You didn't know that in the first place. But on a serious note, what it was showing is we really specifically wanted to compare how much they woke up at night and how they were being fed, to try and tackle those myths. If you breastfeed, your baby will wake up more. If you delay solids, your baby will wake up more. And we just showed that wasn't true. We just showed that babies woke up at night and it didn't matter what you fed them. And it was a really simple little study, but it's had so much kind of positive impact because it's evidence for parents to be able to go, oh, actually, no, this research shows me that actually it's nothing to do with what you feed them. And of course, we know that really, that what you feed somebody isn't going to affect their sleep. They're two completely different things.
Sure.
Why would it? I'm sure you woke up at some point last night. Probably wasn't because you needed some pureed carrot or something. It's just kind of nonsensical that some carrot would help them sleep, or a different type of milk would help them sleep. It just, so we do that sort of thing. And I've done another one recently that I still haven't published, but I've shared with everybody, just showing how often breastfed babies can feed, how irregularly it is, how frequently it is, how all babies are different. And again, just to try and back that up to show, look, there's no fixed schedule for these babies.
Absolutely.
Feeding every 4 hours, most are feeding really frequently. So we do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I remember having discussions with friends when they were having babies, and just especially after I'd had my own, but just thinking about it like that, children, especially babies, they are individual human beings. They're not some robot or alien being that doesn't have a personality or a set of behaviours that's inherent to them. So it's like I'm not a regular eater. I can go for long periods of time without eating myself, but I have a very good friend who needs to eat very regularly, you know, like every 2 to 3 hours, and that's just them. And we can walk along aside each other and not question how that works as, you know, a fully grown human. But this idea that these babies somehow need to fit a mold, I think it is really destructive. And I really hear what you're saying there, because it doesn't make sense when you look at it from a logical perspective that people have bad days. You're always looking for a reason why your baby might be seeming to be a bit more grumpy or tired or whatever, but it's like, oh no, maybe they're just not having a great day. Maybe they don't feel that awesome today.
Yeah. And I mean, kind of recognize that babies are really vulnerable and they're growing and they're developing and they need help with stuff, but then expect them to do things like sleep all night when we don't, or go 4 hours between feeds when we don't. We might go 4 hours between food, but we probably don't go 4 hours without a glass of water or a cup of coffee or something like that. So,
yeah, that's so
and
true.
then we expect them to sleep alone when we don't, and you know, just entertain themselves happily and not want to be close to people they love. It's just really strange.
Yeah.
And then you also then think, oh right, well, we can be really strict and pretend these babies don't have emotions or needs, but we'd like them to grow up into a person who's really caring and responsive and engaging with others. So where's the logic? You know, there's this idea that if you respond to a baby's needs, you'll somehow spoil them, when actually you're teaching them that the world is a good place and someone cares for them and their needs are being met. Those children grow up into confident children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anyone who has we look at your animations can see exactly what you're talking about here. It really plays out, really thought-provoking, but also really simple. It's not like it's complicated. It just helps you switch your brain on to that idea of, oh yeah, maybe that's so true what she just said. Yeah. So I guess one of the other things that I've been thinking about, that's not something that we've talked about in advance, but I know that you've done a bit of work around shifting like individual responsibilization or blaming from individual parents around, you know, the failure to succeed in breastfeeding or to achieve this successful breastfeeding standard. And I'd be interested if you are keen to have a bit of a chat about what things you have sort of thought about and uncovered in relation to trying to shift that conversation to more of a societal whole of sector public health sort of responsibility rather than individual women and their whānau or breastfeeding people.
Yeah, so it is really about trying to get people to realise that it's the culture, society, environment that they're living in that is affecting their experiences. It just seems to be a very common story that public health messages will tell women when they're pregnant, oh, you should really breastfeed your baby. And then we know that breastfeeding works best when you have a supportive environment around that woman, but we often don't have that supportive environment. So then women try to breastfeed, it starts going wrong, they ask for support in various ways and they don't get it. And then they stop breastfeeding and then they think, oh, it's all my fault. Rather than being able to see that actually they were never kind of given that environment and support that they needed to be able to enable them to do it. Now, it might be natural, it might be a normal bodily function and way of kind of feeding a baby, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily easy or you get it right the first time. Like, kind of, you see it as a kind of skill, anything, you know, like babies learning to walk or talk, you know, it takes a bit of time to get it right between you and the baby. You're both new at this, you're both learning to do it. So you need support in different ways, whether that's practical support, whether that's the attitudes around you, whether it's the society that is accepting of you doing it. And we kind of can recognise that there are all these barriers to women breastfeeding, yet somehow we're still in a situation where if she can't, she blames herself.
Yes.
When actually, if you talk to any woman who has stopped before she's ready, and you actually talk her through things and go, well, okay, did you get absolutely perfect support in the hospital when they were born? Did you get all the support you needed in the community? Was your partner and your mother and your friends really supportive? Did they help you? Did they give you time to rest and do everything for you so you could get to know your baby? Did you go out and everybody was completely accepting of breastfeeding? Did you have enough paternity leave? Were there kind of policies in place to support you and your baby? And usually they'll go, oh, right, oh no, well, I got the support, but my partner really didn't like it and they wanted to get the bottle. Or my mother-in-law suggested that you should be on a routine, so I tried to stretch him out a bit. Or the neighbourhood I'm living in really isn't, you don't see many breastfeeding women, and I felt really uncomfortable, so I didn't want to breastfeed in public. Or I had a problem and I couldn't get the support, or a doctor told me I couldn't breastfeed and take that medication.
Yeah.
And there were so many layers where she just doesn't get that support.
And inevitably, inevitably it comes back to that feeling of blame on top of blame, I think, where you try something that someone says this is going to be the fix, or, you know, like the routine, and then you find that actually that doesn't work. And it does. I think it's a compounding thing that leads to that sort of feeling of like, well, might as well just give up, or it's never gonna, I've done all the things that people have told me.
But then she ends up blaming herself and thinking it's her. Rather than shifting it on to actually, if you're going to encourage women to breastfeed, which we should be doing because we know on population health kind of population levels, it supports our health, then you have to create that environment that actually enables them to do it. So kind of a parallel, you have sort of more of a recognition now that, like, things with obesity, if you create an environment that enables people to make healthier food choices, they're more likely to make healthier food choices. So if they've got plenty of good, places to exercise and time to exercise and childcare, and healthier food is on offer and cheaper, and they have the skills to cook, we can kind of recognize that there are all these factors that influence what people actually eat.
And it comes down to feeling confident as well, isn't it? And feeling good about yourself. And that's health promoting from its essence. If you're feeling confident and good and supported, then you're more likely to pursue healthy things.
And if you have the opposite and you have all those factors working against you, then you might not even realize that they're working against you, and you end up blaming yourself, thinking, oh, why don't I make the right food choices? Why do I keep doing this? And sometimes governments, when they don't want to invest and support, can shift the blame onto the individual, saying, oh, it's your fault, you keep making the wrong food choices. We tell you to make the right food choices and you don't. And it's the same for breastfeeding. It's the kind of, oh, why aren't you breastfeeding? We've just cut all these services, and we've cut the peer support funding, and we don't crack down properly on unnecessarily formula milk promotion, and we get you back to work, and, you know, why aren't you breastfeeding? And it's like, well,
hello,
trying to get that shift
to
just, you know, an environment that is really supportive. And I think different countries do it in different ways. We've all got our ways. I know from when I was over, and I remember saying at the conference, you know, you don't have so much of an issue in New Zealand with people being negative about women breastfeeding in public.
Not so much anymore.
So but here we feel very, very uncomfortable. We have big issues with formula milk promotion, but one of the things I've noticed in airports in both New Zealand and Australia is you quite often have, you know, that huge market posters at airports because they know who they're targeting. Australia in particular, when I went to Melbourne last time, I nearly caused a pile up at the bottom of the escalator because I came down the escalator.
Taking photos or
a giant kind of poster promoting. I was just like, I've got to take a photo of this, and then I realised everybody was.
I hear you there.
The gift shop, Sydney Airport gift shop. Okay, you go in and you can buy, you know, all these Australia gifts, all these great kind of presents, and formula milk. It's like, because of market of importing it out to particularly places like China, and the whole range of it. You know, there's child milks and adult milks and older people milks, and it's the industry influence is huge, even if we don't realize it.
It's quite prolific, isn't it?
It doesn't affect me, but it does subtly, because it might not affect directly you, but it affects us as a population. Put all that money into advertising.
Sure. And I think once you sort of take into consideration the things that you were talking about that individual level blame and people feeling responsible for whether or not they, and I hate this terminology, but whether or not they had successful breastfeeding, you inherently look for ways to push against that. And it's why I think sometimes it is really hard to talk about some of the issues surrounding marketing of formula, because people feel a reaction to that, you know, you're saying, hey, this is not right the way that things are being targeted, or maybe somehow you were duped into buying this can of formula or something like that, and it creates a negative reaction. So I think those conversations that you're talking about are so important, because we really do have to change that mentality, that way of thinking. And one of the things we've been talking about with some of the mums that we've been chatting to during this sort of lead up to World Breastfeeding Week is about the importance of feeling as if you've had the opportunity to make an informed decision. You've had the space and the time to look at your options and your choices and really understand those, and that really helps, I think, with your journey in your infant feeding journey, whatever that might look like. If you feel like you've been an active participant in your journey rather than a passive sort of person who's had things happen to them along the way that they've had no they've had no sort of control over. And I think there's a tension there between those informed decision making and the reluctance to talk about things like risks of formula feeding and things like that. Does that sort of resonate with you?
Yes, I mean, it's only natural that if you hear something about breastfeeding when you haven't been able to do it yourself, that you apply it to your own situation. And it's kind of normal to kind of feel reactive and guilty. And it's a really difficult one, because now, you know, we know that formula promotion affects whether women breastfeed or not. When we say that, we're not pointing our finger at any one individual. We're looking at things from a bigger perspective and a bigger pattern. And that's why research is important, because we look at the bigger pattern in the population, not the individual. So I can say now confidently that when a group of women see formula with being promoted with inaccurate messages, that some of them will be affected. I'm not pointing at any one of them, but we have to find a way where we can not feel that personally, where we can realize it's not us at blame, it's not us who have done something, but it is a wider problem. So
absolutely,
it's tackling, but the way the government doesn't tackle it exacerbates the problem that we see, because we shouldn't be needing to have these conversations on an individual level. It should just be sorted at a societal level, that these adverts just don't happen. So we remove the issue. It's that kind of complex blame onto women, which we know is a wider problem.
Patriarchy.
The lack of all those things.
But
it is. I always think that men would not, if men were the ones who were breastfeeding, it just wouldn't be this way. You know, and if you can get women to argue with each other and blame each other and feel personally about a problem, then it distracts from the actual issue, and they can kind of almost wander in, say, she's saying that you're a bad mother, she's saying that you were influenced by this and stop breastfeeding,
judging,
get them to fight and wander off kind of whistling, going, oh well, there we go.
Oh well, it's like that. It's like that really clever the marketing campaign, the whole Mummy Wars thing. It was just an ingenious way of trying to stop people, peers, mothers, parents, alike, but also health professionals talking to women about these things, because immediately you sort of start to go, oh no, like, am I going to be accused of being this judging parent? And I know one of the messages that they had in the campaign was like, think before you speak, better yet, say nothing. And what sorts of messages that sends to people when people are reaching out for help is it's so concerning, but you know, the message is very insidious. And I think touching on what you said before around the marketing and of formula and the way in which that can influence what you're doing. I know myself, all three of my babies have had to be supplemented. In New Zealand, we don't have I think we've got two, one informal and one sort of formal milk bank in Christchurch in New Zealand, but that's about it. So we don't have good access to things like donor milk banks. There's informal milk sharing, but my point is, I went to, so we were topping up with formula. I went to the supermarket, and one of my babies had a bit of an upset stomach at the time, and I stood there and I thought, like, what am I dealing with here? And I see this formula that says, that it's going to help with diarrhea, some such thing. And I looked at that tired parent, and I thought, with all the information and all the knowledge I had, I still looked at that tin and thought, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to spend the extra money and do these things to help try and address an issue. The fact that it said on the tin that it should be used in consultation with a health professional, the fact that it was for special dietary purposes, but it all went past me because it was just there on the shelf in the supermarket, and I thought, well, I need this. He's got this problem, and it's going to fix it. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic that, like, the special dietary stuff and the things that are available just over the counter.
And it shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have a health issue with your baby, and the solution shouldn't be going to the supermarket and spending more money on a baby.
Yeah.
To me, I would genuinely prefer a situation where formula milk is free as a food for babies who need it, compared to the situation we have where huge amounts of money are being put into marketing of specific products, often with very little difference between those products, to try to persuade parents to buy that specific product, when it's not just, it's not a car or a holiday where it doesn't really matter if you go to Portugal or Italy at the end of the day. They can try to persuade you to go to one place or another. It's unlikely to have a lasting impact on you. But if a baby isn't breastfed, they must have formula. They can't not have it. It is important for them to have it. So why is this a product that parents have to pay a lot of money for and is marketed? There's something really kind of
such a good point. And it goes back to, I think, the things that you were saying before about understanding normal infant behaviour and feeding patterns. You go to the supermarket, you've got this hungry baby, is feeding every 45 minutes to an hour to 2 hours, maybe cluster feeding, who knows what they're going through at the time. Someone says to you, oh, that baby must be hungry, and right there in front of you while you're doing your shop is a formula for hungry babies. It's very
it should not be that way. I don't know what the market is like in New Zealand, but in the UK, any first infant formula, which is suitable from birth to 12 months, pretty much has exactly the same ingredients as any of the others. If one of them supposedly made this special ingredient that was shown to have an impact on babies, by law it would have to be added to all the others, because this is so important for infant health that they get the best possible milk for them. So why do we have all these different brands competing with each other and all these different things when we're talking about babies' health? It shouldn't be that way. To me, I don't know if I go as far as saying it's a medical product, but it should be something that the baby can access for free. It should never be in the hands of capitalism and the patriarchy and all of that. That baby should get the very best formula at a price that is the cheapest possible for the parents.
Absolutely.
Issues in the UK where, you know, parents with not very much money at all are buying the most expensive one because they're absolutely convinced that it must be better than the one that's half the price. That's logical. You would expect that to some extent, wouldn't you? That if something's more expensive and looks more scientific, then it's going to be better for your baby, but they can't afford it. So then they're doing things like watering it down or going food themselves to be able to buy this product when they could have had the one that was much, much cheaper, which would have had exactly the same impact for their baby.
And it comes from that place of wanting to do your absolute best for that baby or child who you love. And it is such a good point that you make. I've heard lots of people talk about that issue in lots of different ways, but never quite in that way that makes such good logical sense. And certainly in Aotearoa here we have similar issues with you know, people who are using formula who can't afford it, but also feeling ashamed or judged or whatever reason, not wanting to talk to their health worker about that. So they're also missing out on really important information about how to use those products safely. And I know that there are people who will make up feeds and keep them because they can't afford to throw a bottle away. They've got to stretch that out to, you know, the next date. Where, you're so right. It should not be like that. If they need that product, then it should be available without cost as a barrier, and it shouldn't be a class-related issue. It should be something that's free from those commercial interests and bias. I knew there'd be good things to talk to you about.
It's kind of building on that mummy guilt that you've just kind of mentioned, that if you can also make a woman feel really guilty for not breastfeeding, and if you can make her feel that it's her fault, she's going to want to desperately try and fix that. So she's going to go to the supermarket, she's going to look at that range of products, and she's going to see one that is really more expensive, that has lots of science written all over it, that has these studies that have been conducted by the companies on very small amounts of babies and are a bit dubious. You're going to buy that one. And again, I'm not saying you, Sally, over there, that's what you did, but I'm saying as a group, that's what we do. We want the babies, so we assume that the one that talks about science and all of that, is the one that we should, because we can ease our guilt a little bit with that. When everyone shouldn't be feeling guilty in the first place, we should be feeling angry, and we shouldn't be having presented with all these different costs and types. We should be able to get the very best for our baby. For whatever cost price it is. I can't get past the idea of profit being made from it. When it's not, you know, it's when say you get to baby foods, and you always have the option of cooking at home and cooking for your baby and making your own baby food, and you go to the supermarket and you see lots of different ones, it's not quite the same issue, because there is an alternative you could use, but with formula there's not, if you're not able to breastfeed. So take it out of politics and patriarchy and all the nasty things beginning with P.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's such a good point. And it is interesting even that you mentioned with the baby foods and solids and things like that. That's a whole nother discussion as well. But I know similar situations about things like, you know, it's iron fortified, it's this, that, and the other thing. I mean, and I know in New Zealand, and I'm not sure in the UK, but it wouldn't be surprising if it's the same thing, that we do have an issue with children, our tamariki, being introduced to solids way too early, less than 5 months of age. About over 30% of our children are eating solids before 5 months, and you've got to think that that's something to do with those marketing tactics and all of the things around the brain development, the eye development, the fortification, where what is that if not a bit of spinach or something green in a nice puree of pumpkin or something like that. But again, it goes back to also that issue of access and, you know, food insecurity. There's so many things that are piled on top of each other, and none of those are things to feeding our babies. We shouldn't have to I guess we shouldn't have to have a situation where some people can afford these things and others can't, but we do, I guess.
Yeah. But it's kind of slightly different situation in that again, it comes down to the marketing, doesn't it? And the idea that these products will be good for you, especially the ones that are more expensive and organic and have these range of tastes in the title, when actually there's a whole load of misleading stuff going on there as well. I mean, it costs very little to make your baby an apple puree yourself, although it does rely on you having facilities to actually cook and cook safely and all of that. So we know those in the most underprivileged circumstances are going to struggle there. So you can then understand why they go for baby food. So much misleading stuff around content of those things.
Oh, yeah.
And when you kind of see things being labelled, they do research that shows what kind of foods and flavours parents want their baby to eat. So they come up with the things like the kale and the spinach and the super grains.
Oh, it was just, that was exactly what I was going to say. And then you look on the back of that packet and you're thinking, oh, look at me, I'm giving my baby kale and spinach, and then it's like 90% apple or even more, and then like 2% reconstituted kale or something, and 1% spinach, and you think, oh no. Yeah.
The vast majority of baby foods are basically apple and pear or rice with a bit of flavour to them. So, and then if you go to compare the same product but in different countries, they'll actually move the words around depending on what they think that population will want more.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's one of the purees, and this isn't accurate, but the example is that if it's in the UK, it's like kale, spinach, apple, but if it's in the US, it's like spinach, kale, apple, because they've done market research and they've shown that for some reason the Brits want kale and the Americans want spinach. So it's all marketing and just...
You've just got to think, imagine if we had the resources to market and support and sell and research breasts and breastfeeding, or as much as these companies do, whether or not we'd still be faced with the same level of inequities and misinformation and inconsistent advice if that was that sort of resource was at our disposal. Was there any, I mean, I we've gone on a tangent and I apologise, it's probably partly my doing that. You're such a person so full of knowledge. Was there anything else that you particularly wanted to share, or anything that you can think of that you'd like to point people to in terms of resources other than what we've already covered off?
No, I think we've probably talked about a lot of stuff that we naturally were. I know you're going to pop it in the link somewhere, but I've just tried to put together all my research and resources and blogs and animations all into one place so we can put up the link for that. The idea is that I'm going to finish linking all my research papers to this website. I started doing it, then realised I'd published far too much.
It's amazing.
I was like, why did I agree to do this? Why did I start? No, but I've got all my blogs into one place and all my media recordings into one place and Facebook Lives and stuff, and then all the research papers and animations. So
it's a really
resource.
Yeah, it's a really good resource, and it's so beautifully presented. And yeah, like you said, it's just so much covered, but done in a way that feels quite accessible and not too overwhelming. And I think we'll definitely be sharing some of your animations there, because yeah, I think they're really, really great. And I just, from a women's health actions perspective, we always try to bring the conversation back to what's important to the breastfeeding parent and their whānau, and you know, and what do they need. And I really love that your research is coming from that really consumer driven place, because that's how we get the change that we need. Yeah. Well, so thank you so much for joining us, and or joining me, and I really look forward to you know, people learning lots from this discussion, and happy soon to be World Breastfeeding Week.